there are journeys that take you across the world. And then there are journeys that return you to who you truly are. This episode is part of Destination Awakening, Journey as Initiation, Travel as Transmission, a curated documentary-style symposium created in collaboration with GnosticTV and directed by me. What you are about to enter is not just a conversation. It is part of a wider field, a body of transmissions by wisdom keepers and code carriers from different traditions, exploring sacred sites, ancient lineages, and the role of travel as a catalyst for remembrance and embodied leadership at the time. This series originally lives on GnosticTV, and I am opening the episodes here on the Sacred Travel Podcast and the Travel Alchemy Show so more people can watch them. If you feel the resonance of these transmissions, you are invited to step deeper into the full symposium experience. The original link is shared in the show notes below. And I warmly invite you to get in touch with all the amazing speakers, as each of their unique perspectives and angles holds wisdom codes for your becoming. If these conversations resonate with you, I'd love for you to leave us a thumbs up and subscribe for more. But now, enjoy.
India's got so much of heterogeneity, so much of diversity, and all of the diversity is so different from what we experience everywhere else in the world.
Welcome to Destination Awakening, a symposium inviting you to remember how travel, when walked with intention, becomes a catalyst for transformation, spiritual awakening, conscious leadership, and meaningful change in the world. Our next guest represents a powerful evolution in how leadership and travel intersect in our changing world. Dr. Sandeep Nath is the founder of the Renewalism Movement, a global initiative dedicated to raising human consciousness through the transformation of individual habits, leadership mindset, and lived experience. A former strategy consultant, Sandeep built and led successful consulting company before stepping away from the conventional path of a corporate success to journey into the Himalayas in search of deeper answers for purpose, energy, and the drivers of human potential. And what emerged from that quest is a body of work that bridges ancient Eastern wisdom with modern leadership and the future of work. At the heart of his work is a new paradigm he calls Renewalism Tourism, a category of travel designed not merely for exploration, but for inner renewal and expanded perspective. Through carefully curated journeys across India that combine immersive cultural travel with dedicated retreat experiences, business leaders and change makers are invited to step out of the noise of modern life and help them renew their energy, expand their vision, and return to their work with greater awareness and the impact they create in the world. It is an honor to welcome Dr. Sandeep Nath to Destination Awakening.
My God, Julia, that was wonderful. Thank you. I'm going to ask you for that script. It's so beautifully written. Thank you. Wonderful to be here.
Well, thank you for being here. And, I want to start with that you are from India, so you're coming from India to us today to talk about that. And many people say that their visit to India was really transformational. Tell us why.
Yes, that is very true. That's been my experience as well. And short answer, India is not like any other country on the planet. India has got so much of heterogeneity, so much of diversity, and all of the diversity is so different from what we experience everywhere else in the world that the moment you can get a perspective of what's happening as soon as you get out of the airport you're transformed. you know? And that's what has been happening with so many of our guests over the last 10 years, that you're not exposed to, it's the elements, okay, the heat, the light, the noise, but also the flow, the state of how everything can be in movement and not colliding. Now, that is what we see in the traffic of India, for example. You get on the airport and you've got about 8 or 9 forms of vehicles right next to you, from two-wheelers, the bicycles, to the motorcycles, to, 3-wheelers, the autos, tuk-tuks, four-wheelers we are aware of, and of course 8-wheelers, 12-wheelers, and all of that. Plus, depending on the city you're in, there could be animals. And we're talking about animals used for transport. But there are also animals which are used for dairy, and, and that's another story. So, and despite all that, we're navigating the street and not hitting anybody. The cow is got it's not got its own lane, it's got its own space, which is respected by the motorcyclist and the car driver, and everybody goes on in their own ways. So when you say that the visit is transformational, I'd say that the most important thing is people get to discover the flow, and they're in this melting pot, which is a different energy, and that takes travelers into their own state of being, becoming part of that melting pot. And that's an unmatchable experience. You can't match that anywhere else. It's not about culture, it's not about history, it's not about anything. It's about what's happening inside you. So the problem here is that it can be very overwhelming. And the key is to how not to suffer India and how to enjoy it. Because it's very easy to suffer India, because it just hits you. And what you learn when you have been prepared properly for it, the way we do at Renewal Tourism, it's not just like you very beautifully put it. It's not about tourism, it's not about travel. It's actually a reframe of how your thinking, your mind, your conditioning about everything can operate from a different level of consciousness. Why? Because you start becoming an observer. And when you worked with us, you know what to observe for, you know what to expect. So my wife, who set up this company, she used to say, "You're going to be part of the video game," and that's a lot of fun. A video game is adventure. A video game is not something that it could be very stressful because you're having responses every nanosecond. But it is also something that you love because you've accepted that on yourself, and so it's not the stress of having to navigate something new, but it's the pleasure of knowing that, wow, I'm discovering myself differently. That's what India does to you.
I don't even know what to say, when you say like video game, but then also I really get these smells from what you're describing. Like I get all the colors, I get the noise. So it's not just a video game, it's almost like a 5D transmission that you are giving. So we can really feel it and we're in it. And I would be curious to know that you have guided so many travelers through India in the past years. What have you observed in people when they experience this country in such a deeper way? What's the transformation?
So the biggest exploration happens inside. You come to discover maybe a nation of 30 states and 35 official languages, and tribes and mountains and all sorts of concepts you might have before you come. All right, this is on my agenda. I want to go to a 5,000-year-old city which is still alive, all of those things. But when you start moving, you discover who you really are and how we fit in this piece. So that when we go back to wherever we do, it could be Switzerland, it could be the UK, it could be Australia or the US or wherever, the East or West, we go back with a better understanding of what's this whole ecosystem about, what is it that we do as human beings, and that we experience a sudden shift in perspective, you know? So, like, for example, diverse religions and ideologies, when they mesh with each other, and we live life as though nothing is different. There's nothing divisive. You board a metro train, and you've got people with all sorts of habits which come from their conditioning. Somebody's, with their cell phones. A lot of people are with their cell phones, but then somebody's with maybe a mala, and somebody's just lost in a chant, and you find that these are not things that we're used to seeing on a metro train. We suddenly find that, all right, this guy is wearing a funny hat which you identify with maybe some sect, and somebody else is wearing another turban, and they're sharing lunch together. And how does that even happen, you know and that is where the inner exploration begins. Like, for example, my wife, she was from Mexico, and she was the first time she came way back in 2006, she suffered India, because it can be overwhelming. Like, when people talk to each other and you see that they look different, you might get a sense that they're fighting with each other, because that's our conditioning, that, okay, people are different, they're opposing each other. But Hindi, which is the official language in the north of India, is such a high decibel language that they're actually just exchanging normal conversation like probably we are now. But the way they do it, it sounds like they're absolutely at loggerheads with each other, and that doesn't sound good. So, so, so she was like, man, why are they fighting? And then they stop, and then they just give each other a hug and go their separate ways. So what the hell just happened? So these experiences can completely get get to sort of move you off your pivots and make you wonder,
Yeah.
how do I respond to this? And that's where preparation is important, and that's where you're expecting what knowing what to expect, and then you being the observer for that. So that sort of is the biggest takeaway that travelers have had.
I love how you say, people are just giving each other space. And like even the cow that you have, I feel that is such a big, important learning that when we walk in our Western world today, we don't see very often. So that's a huge takeaway. Thanks for sharing that with us.
Thank you.
Now, you have your clients are mainly also business leaders. What is it about India's culture and philosophy that you believe that leaders can learn from today?
Ooh, that's a biggie. Well, thank you for mentioning that, because it makes me very proud, even though I'm saying this about the country I was born in. But having been a global traveler, having my wife, like I said, was Mexican, so having traveled across 4 continents, I still say that what we've got here from a business point of view is at multiple layers. The first layer is the most obvious one for this decade, that given the current scenario of economics and geopolitics, India is maintaining a stand which is unique and non-aligned. We've been non-aligned for many, many years, but there are still those diplomatic quarrels that keep happening. But the way that we're positioning ourselves, and now we're sort of setting up a refinery in the United States, and we've already set up their entire IT infrastructure there. So there is a lot of learnings for anybody in business to have by coming to India and understanding how the Indian works, how the Indian mind works. And mind you, Julia, this Indian mind is very different in India than it is outside India. All right. So,
I can imagine.
yeah, yeah, yeah. You can't even imagine, actually. There is a deep seated sense of innovation in India. which is why we sort of launch a what's that, a spacecraft at the cost of Hollywood production, or less. And that innovation gets sort of suppressed when we go overseas, when we go to the West or wherever, because their systems take over, and we're very good at just flowing into those systems. So we just flow in wherever we go, keep our head down, and do whatever is to be done. But in India, we don't keep our heads down, and we do what is called Jugaad. Jugaad is the word for innovation, and that's how you get things done. So when you come here, you will find a lot of small things done by village women, which are so efficient and so maybe even cost effective, because you just have a homegrown remedy for various things and stuff, and that mentality of jugaad, which comes from the village woman and goes into the large corporate house, which sends the satellite to the moon and whatever they do, you know, that is something that you will find consistently here. And in the current scenario, we've got to understand what that is. But that's not the only thing. The other thing is that India's got a 5 to 10,000 years of history. I mean, 5,000 years clearly documented history. And it has been on the Silk Road, on the on the major trade routes ever since forever. So to know that that is the DNA of this country is important, because if you need to collaborate or compete with an Indian, then understanding their DNA is so important. And that is the second reason why I say that it's very important for business people to come to India. The third is that it's just a great renewal, because like we were discussing, you completely renew your perspective, and perspective is everything about how you live life, isn't it? So you sort of get a 180-degree shift over there, and then like somebody said, that the sign of maturity as a leader is to be able to hold two opposing perspectives at the same time and still function properly. And you don't know what the other perspectives are unless you've really immersed yourself in them. So that's what we do. We do immersive retreats over here.
It, so much of what you said resonated. And, I call that the coexisting, contradicting truths. So I'm very glad that you are speaking into that, because I see that, how it makes us a better leader. And I'm actually not just thinking, of business leaders, but like everybody who holds a responsibility in a family, in a community. Like, this is how we can, yeah, expand our capacity. So I'm really glad that you found your Jugaad in the renewalism movement as an answer to the current state. Can you share a little bit what that movement is about and what inspired you to create it?
And somewhere while running that, I got a feeling that we could do more. I was in search of possibilities. In fact, to be completely honest with you, I thought we were creating more problems for the world than we solved. And that took me to study for Vedic gurus, Taoist masters, Zen monks, and Tibetan lamas. And I brought back that ancient Oriental wisdom in the form of something that we now have introduced, the Renewalism Movement. All right. So you see this book here, its title is Renewal. And this was a word that popped into my head in November 2019. Now, I'll just pull back 15 years from this point in time, when I was running a very successful corporate consultancy. We were into communications and culture building for various companies that were coming into India, and various startups as well. But while I was doing that, Julia, I got this sense of disillusionment, in a sense, because it seemed to me that we are, as we go forward, creating more problems for the world than we are solving. The problems of stress, like when a company is doing business process outsourcing in India, which was very popular in the early 2000s, and we had several clients we're doing town halls and events and stuff like that. And we discovered that, man, we've got some of the best Indian kids in their 20s getting top dollar salaries and doing very clerical work with a very low sense of purpose and growth. And is that what we want to willingly put our kids into? And more than that, against the circadian rhythm, are they going to be like, fine, is this the right way to go? And then I had a hospital on the other side and I knew their business plans, and they were setting up 20 new hospitals in the next 3 years. I said, man, we need 20 new hospitals.
Oh, wow.
We are headed for a problem. So, so anyhow, that's the part that drove me to the Himalayas. Eventually, in 2010, I handed my company over to the other directors, and I said, I need to deep dive into this, like you said in my introduction so sweetly. But why I share this is because I knew there is a problem, but I didn't have a solution. But in November 2019, suddenly, fam, this word came to me, and I started writing. And in 40 days, I had 240 pages on the computer. And when I was sitting and editing, it struck me that this is about our personal habits.
Mm.
And when we can change our habits, we can change what's around us. So, this renewal is the answer to that problem that was dogging me 15 years ago. We cannot change corporate consciousness as easily as we probably can change our own habits. And as we empower in companies people to start changing their habits for greater productivity, for greater happiness, for greater performance, and get all that functioning organically because of the way that we work, we are renewing our company to higher levels of team bonding and group productivity, which then is going to result in higher profitability. And so that's where the renewalism movement came up from. It came from the book. It came from my going back after a hiatus of 15 years to the corporates to say, okay, hey, let's relook at your people, purpose, and process and align them with a different, a different state of consciousness to create a conscious culture in your organization, to create a more mindful way of doing things, which then, and this is also very well timed, which then helps us capitalize on the biggest intellectual asset that we have in the fourth industrial revolution, when men and machine have to work together. Consciousness is what machines can't have. That's what we've got. So let's learn to capitalize on consciousness and not make a reality of all the Hollywood doomsday stories, the Matrix and whatever else, which could be true, which could be something that is a far cry. It could be theoretical, but at the end of the day, the fourth industrial revolution is upon us, and we need to do something as human beings to gear ourselves up for it. And what I see is that if we go more deep inside ourselves, then we would be able to find the answers to guide the machines and their decisions more correctly. So renewal tourism then was born out of this as well, that you want to get inside yourself, do it immersively. And that's why it's for senior leadership to come and immerse themselves in the best place there is to immerse yourself. And that's how the two come together and everything.
And you are actually the best example. Like, you are the embodiment of that, because when you were in that pivotal moment of your life, you did not sit down to just develop another strategy. Like, you retrieved in pilgrimage, basically, right? To find the answers within. And I just want to also ask you about, that concept of renewal tourism, which you describe also as a new category of conscious travel. So how did that look like for you? And what does that look like for also the leaders who go with you in practice?
Thank you. So let me also give you a prelude to that one, just to contextify so that there's complete transparency with our viewers and listeners, that I didn't think of renewal tourism the way, in hindsight, it all makes a lot of sense. But my wife had started that company in 2016 because like I said, she had figured out the gap between suffering in India and enjoying it. And she wanted to create those experiences where you knew what to expect. You could be the observer, you could get into that adventure. And she did that beautifully well. And she set up these curated circuits where we know where to stay, we know where to go. And we were, in any case, doing those retreats on the body, mind, spirit, and stuff like that. Not necessarily with our tourists, but as a separate activity. So we've done retreats, like I said, we were traveling, doing those retreats across 4 continents. In 2024, I lost my wife, which is why I speak of her in the past tense. And then we had this vacuum with regard to the travel side of what we did. And sometime in the end of 2025, in the last quarter, or rather in the second last quarter, sometime around September, we were brainstorming this global wisdom workforce that we have, which executes the renewalism initiatives. We were discussing one thing that would shift this whole concept of using habits to renew and creating a culture, shift that from a nice to have to a need to have. And suddenly it occurred to me that the one time when people really feel that they need something is when we've been talking to them, and we've been talking to lay consumers or parts of companies, but coming on their own budgets, you know. But when we talk to them about coming to India, their eyes light up. They need that. It's somehow on their bucket list, or it's somehow something exciting, something different. And that practically happens all the time. And if they have been to India, then they have a story to tell. And they say, oh man, you're from India. Let me tell you what happened when I was there. I said, why don't we tap into that? Because these same people are working for those companies in senior leadership positions. Why don't we get their eyes to light up at the mention of something immersive that gets them into a renewal mode? And so, to honor my wife and to leverage the goodwill that she'd built in all those networks and arrangements, we converted what she had set up into what's now called Renewal Tourism, which is about a week or so, depending on the time you have. But let's say you have 2 weeks, then a week of traveling in a defined circuit, which could be in Ladakh in the Himalayas, which could be in Rajasthan, the Taj Mahal and all those sort of things in the center. Or it could be in the south, the peninsular part of India, where you have Ayurveda, you have a lot of spiritual centers and stuff like that. Any of those 3 circuits, plus 1 week in whichever circuit you've taken, we've got a retreat center around there. We get you there and we align body, mind, and spirit. Now, that's done through multiple modalities. So, on the website, which is up here, renewaltourism.com, one can get to choose and have a discussion to mix and match what would be of great interest. If you have more than 2 weeks, let's say, then, I mean, I would recommend 2 weeks, because if you're spending all the money on the flight, then you might as well make the most of it, right? And we're not talking about large groups. We're talking about customized, personalized trips in SUVs. We're not filling seats on a bus. We're actually looking at only 4 people together. And if they're just 2 people from an organization, then they go along with 1 or 2 people from another. And that's it. So in these groups of 4, you really get that immersive experience. And maybe you do a northern circuit and a central circuit and then do your retreat. But definitely the retreat is for a week. And this is called an ideal retreat, which is IDEAL, which is immersive discovery. You know, you felt the flow, now you discover what's in it for you. Empowering, aligning, and then you leave in the vibration of love. I believe love drives everything. And if you can then get a hang of this frequency that you're leaving with, you will want it in your entire team. And that's where we engage with the entire team online. And why online? Because it's scalable. So monkey see, monkey do. Once you've got your senior leaders doing something online and it's working to create new habits and spread that love vibration, which is reducing conflict, which is improving efficiency and making a happier place, they would be able to do it in their other offices. So you do it in, let's say, your office in maybe London, and they do it in their teams, which are maybe in Manila and Madrid. So that's why the renewalism per se is scalable and goes on that way. But renewal tourism was set up so that people get this confluence of an immersive experience and processing that by way of a retreat, bringing body, mind, and spirit in alignment.
When you were talking, I really had this image of, that network of light where it's just the passing on or passing on of the torch and the light. So it can spread from one to the other. And then all of a sudden, like with only these tiny movements, right? And these tiny habits that we're changing, we have a global ball of light and coherence. So that's a beautiful visual.
Beautiful.
Wow. So that is a lot and that is very deep. For those who feel called to explore this work or perhaps even travel with you to India, where can they learn more about you and what's the best way to connect with you?
So these are two sites, renewaltourism.com and renewalism.com. There are a lot of articles on renewalism.com that are interesting to read. And on both sides, you've got the reach out page. Love to see you on the other side. But I have a gift for the viewers and listeners here. And is that okay, Julia, if I announce
Please, absolutely.
this book? So this book, which was actually put together in the first quarter of 2020, when I was editing, the lockdown started, and I discovered that a lot of the habits that we talked about over here were what were actually required in the world. It began with mindfulness. And you had to be mindful of your mask and of physical distancing and of hygiene. So you can't change a habit or do anything about what you do unless you're mindful of what you do. And starting with mindfulness, going into self renewal, going into all that, this book is like a Bible for anybody who wants to be on top of themselves. And I'd like to give a PDF of this for free, absolutely, to anybody who would be kind enough to take a photo of this QR code and send a little feedback, because, it's a give and take. And by the time you finish giving your feedback, the book will be a PDF open in front of you. So I'd love to connect with you there also, because once you give your feedback, I'll know who you are. And if there's anything I can do for you, let's have a no obligations chat, answer your questions.
That is amazing. Thank you so much for that. And I can only encourage everybody to look it up and scan the code and leave some feedback. And then you'll have a beautiful, not one, but many pages of wisdom in your hands. So do that. Sandeep, if there's one thing that you would want to walk the audience away today with, like what would that be?
Well, I'd say don't underestimate the power of your habits. Our habits are not only what we do, which then shape our outcomes, right? They're also how we influence our world and how we let our peers and our juniors know what's right. And we can change the patterns of conditioning based on what we do and how we are changing our habits. But that's also not where it stops. Everything is in threes somehow. There's another book I wrote after this called The Emptiness of Success, where I deep dive into how everything is in threes: the body, mind, spirit. And so here also you've got a third thing, which is how your habits. Now, the Sanskrit word for action, which is what the habit produces, action is karma. I'm sure many of our listeners have come across that word. Many may know that that's the translation. But to be able to relate your karma, which transfers from life to life, for those of you who are with me on that, that's your karmic mind stream you're impacting. And I will prove to you in a minute that it is true, this whole reincarnation business, because how else do you explain a prodigy? A kid who's playing the piano at the age of 3 has carried it in their karmic mind stream. They were so habituated to those keyboards that they could do it. I mean, I've had my nephews and nieces who, my wife was, in fact, she used to always take this test. She'd speak to them in Spanish. And you know, 0.000000001% of India speaks Spanish. So there's no way that that could have had an Indian descent. But there was a nephew of mine who was speaking Spanish and who was understanding Spanish. He was just one and a half or two when, that very naughty age when he was
Wow.
listening to my wife and taking commands. So your habits impact your mind stream for future lives as well. And why not get into the habit of exploration? In fact, travel to, travel, to ventilate, to mingle is one of the habits in the book Renewal as well. Because it's that important to just let the air in and out. And so I think on that note, I'll leave you guys that your habits decide your past, present, and future.
Thank you, Sandeep. Thank you for reminding us that it's about the habits, and it's also that the future of leadership is not only about strategy, innovation, or performance. It's about renewal in many forms as a powerful catalyst for perspective, consciousness, and transformation. And also about the willingness to step outside the noise of the world long enough to remember who we are, what truly drives us, drives our energy, and the deeper purpose behind the work that we do. And perhaps most importantly, that the leaders shaping the future of our world must first learn how to renew themselves in mind and spirit and in the way that they walk upon the earth. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us today.
It was a delight. Thank you so much.